Hello again, baseball romantics. Welcome back to another episode of the RAB podcast. And as usual, I've got the Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge of podcast partners, my MVPs, Bruce and Nico. We're back at full strength this week with all three of us to talk some ball and a lot of great stuff going on. So we want to get right to it. And of course, last week, me and Bruce talked a lot about the Devers trade, but Nico was on the IL. So we want to get Nico's thoughts on that huge trade between the Red Sox and the Giants, the fallout, the effects. So, Nico, we're going to kick it off with you, man. Give us your thoughts around the Devers trade and what you took from that.
All right, guys. Thanks, Jason. Good to be back with you guys. I've been cooking now for about a week or so since the Devers trade, and I've been jonesing to talk about it. So I'm excited to actually get your guys' reaction as well as mine. But obviously, it's kind of old news now. But Devers was traded to the Giants, and my instant reaction, as it's no secret, it's my hometown team. The Red Sox is the team kind of closest to me. So I'm kind of that, I hold that sort of near and dear to my heart. And my instant reaction was to the trade. It was very interesting timing was the first reaction because they had just swept the Yankees and they just got back over 500. And at that moment in time, I think the vibes in Boston were very strong. They had just called Roman Anthony up along with, the current core of players they had. We finally got off Boston's back a little bit, right? We've been on their back a little bit for the last few weeks with the Alex Cora situation and whether or not he is or isn't on the hot seat. Obviously, he's not. So I thought the timing of it was very interesting. And my instant reaction was this relationship that bad? Or we weren't sure how bad it was. How bad was that clubhouse effect with Rafi Devers? We knew that there was issues, once they signed Bregman, and we knew that, Rafi was receptive to any sort of, position change. But, when you watch the games, guys, I watched Rafi perform, and I didn't see a guy that looked unhappy. And I didn't see a guy that looked like he didn't have a good relationship with his teammates. So, I want to speak to Red Sox Nation directly. I don't understand the direction of this team because this is another guy that they're letting go who is an elite baseball player in the major leagues. I don't want to look too far back in the history, but 2018 Red Sox, the World Series champs, once upon a time, we had Mookie, we had Bogarts, we had Chris Sale, and we had a young Rafi Devers. They traded Mookie, which I still to this day think is a travesty. Obviously, we can go on about that. Letting Bogarts walk, I can understand. San Diego's contract was ridiculous. It was just, I like Bogarts. He was beloved in Boston. However, I don't think Boston should have gave him that 10-year contract that San Diego did, obviously. And then obviously Chris Sale got traded. I don't harp on that too much because we weren't really sure what was left of Chris Sale. I think everyone's very surprised of that. I think Atlanta obviously won that side of things greatly to this day. But this is another piece of the puzzle that Boston has let walk, or they've traded, rather. A guy they signed to a long-term deal, a guy who's 28 years old, who is an elite hitter in baseball. So I'm very frustrated with the trade. I really thought that we had gotten past the Hein Bloom era in Boston. We were sort of weeding out, the guys that Dave Dombrowski had. And I don't understand the direction of the team. I really don't. I still don't. I still don't understand the direction of the team. With that being said, I understand that they're trying to invest in their young kids coming up. Roman Anthony, Marcelo Meyer, Christian Campbell, who just got recently sent down, which, it happens, happens to Francisco Alvarez on the Mets after he hit a home run on Saturday night. So these things happen, but it's a shocking trade. Anytime a guy of that level gets traded in the league, the whole league feels it, and it's disappointing. I wish Boston well. I don't think that they can replace Devers. certainly not in the short term. The return to me is almost irrelevant. Personally, I feel like as soon as they found a suitor that was willing to take that money, they washed their hands.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Bruce did a great job illustrating some of those guys that came back in the return. Maybe Jordan Hicks is a guy that can rely on, and at the back end of that rotation. Um, but and then flip the coin. What a trade for the Giants. They've been looking for a guy like this for several years. The previous general manager, Farhan Zaidi, has been looking for that guy. They went after Aaron Judge. They went after Shohei Ohtani, even though, it didn't happen. They signed Carlos Correa, and then obviously that fizzled out. So the Giants have been looking for an elite slugger in baseball, and they finally got it. And I continue to marvel at the job that Buster Posey has done in year one in San Francisco. He's building a winning team. You're going to slide Devers into that lineup with Willie Adames, Heliot Ramos, and they're going to be a dangerous team. They're not going to chase down the Dodgers, but they are going to be a very, very dangerous team if they can make the playoffs, which I fully expect them to, because the rotation has been stellar, and it's a win for the Giants, and it's a huge, punch in the gut for the Red Sox and the Red Sox Nation.
Yeah, I agree on most everything you said. I think you said it really well. I will say this, like, I've gone back and forth. In some situations, there's blame to go around, right? I mean, at first I was kind of like, why doesn't Devers just shut up and go play where they ask him to? They're paying him all this money. Then when you really start to think about it, because I was kind of explaining this whole situation to my wife who didn't really know what was going on. And as I talked about it, I'm like, wow, this really was like, why did they? Devers was their third baseman. They signed him to a long-term deal. He's one of their best players. They committed to him, and then they go out and sign an all-star third baseman. And they don't ask the new guy to move. They asked the guy they'd already signed to a long-term contract to move once already, and then they were asking him to do it again. I mean, he's gone to San Francisco and said, "Hey, I'll play wherever they ask me to." I think it was about respect. I think it was about the way he was treated more than Devers just not being a team player. I do get the impression from some of the things, I think me and Bruce discussed this briefly last week, but some of the teammates have made some comments that lead me to believe maybe uh, there was some tension in that clubhouse, and so moving him was urgent, and that's why maybe they got the return that they did get. Like, okay, we'll take that. Let's get him out of here, because the timing
Yeah.
was awfully strange for sure. As far as the Giants, absolutely makes them better. I appreciate what Buster Posey's doing. If I'm him, I'm not worried about the long-term deals right now. You deal with that 10 years from now. I mean, we got World War III about to break out. We may not be here 10 years from now, right? So try to win the World Series now. Try to get it now. Like, 10 years will take care of itself. We'll figure it out then. I like what he's doing. I like the aggressiveness. So I think it was a bigger win for the Giants, obviously. Although getting rid of a clubhouse, I don't want to say he's a cancer. I don't think Devers is a cancer. I just think it was a bad situation for everybody. So that may relieve some tension in the Boston clubhouse. But yeah, I think there's blame to go around. But I'm like you, Nico. I don't see the direction that Boston's really trying to go in here.
Well, I see the
Yeah.
direction. The direction is they're burning it down.
Yeah.
Like they've been, and I don't want to make it sound like this was a plan, because I don't think it was.
Right.
Miko, you make great points about Betts and Bogarts and Sale. But yeah, the Sale thing. Listen, man, when they got rid of Sale, I was like, well, it's about time. That's
Yeah.
how I felt about it. I was like, it's about time. How long were they going to put into this guy? But the Mookie Betts versus Xander Bogaerts, we talked a little bit about it last week. If it were me, I'd have picked Betts all day, every day. But I would have pushed Bogaerts out. Not that, and which isn't to say he's not a good player, but we just watched them incrementally try to cut salary and still be competitive. And I think what they're doing now is saying, listen, we have to take a different approach to being competitive. If we're not going to spend like the Yankees and Dodgers and Mets and Phillies, which they're not, then we need to figure out how to win. And the answer is in Roman Anthony, and the answer is in Marcelo, and that's where the answer is for them. And I think they're buying into that now wholesale. Red Sox fans, don't despair for the loss of this year, because it's gone. This is them signaling we're out for this year, which is okay. They're going to build back, and hopefully they're going to create a more sustainable path forward in Boston that's not going to be a $300 million payroll every year, because that's what they're trying to avoid. So I see it. I just don't know if it's going to work. And I don't know if these prospects are the ones that are going to do it for them. No, I'm not throwing shade on Marcelo or Roman or any of those guys. I just don't see the big stud starting pitcher if they're not going to spend money, right? They've got pitching now and they're going to waste it. That's what I see. I see they're going to waste these acquisitions, which just goes back to, I think, Nico, you said something about it in your discussion, was that, there just doesn't seem like a real plan forward from today. There seems like more of a path, oh, we'll get there, as opposed to this is what we're doing right now. So that's my take on the Red Sox path. I think they have a plan. I just don't know how fleshed out and thoughtful it is.
And I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent on this, but I was thinking as you were talking, Bruce, like, the Red Sox haven't won a World Series since 2018, which is now, we know, I won't say for sure they're not going to win it this year, but let's just assume. Okay. So we're talking at least 8 years, probably, right? The Yankees haven't won a World Series since 2009, and they've only been to one since then, last year. Let's put some blame to, like, I don't know if blame's the right word, but Toronto, Baltimore, Tampa. Now, what have you been doing? The two powerhouses of this division that traditionally dominate this division have been, I mean, the Yankees have been good during this run, and Boston's been okay, even when they haven't won the championships in between. But this is their chance. Like, Baltimore had a window here, and we've talked about Baltimore already a lot this year because of the disappointment they are, and they have come on a little bit here lately. But, like, this was their chance. The Yankees and Red Sox are still scuffling, and I know the Yankees are in first place before Yankee fans start jumping on Facebook to attack me. But, does anybody think the Yankees as constructed right now are going to beat the Dodgers or the Phillies or really anybody in the World Series or even Detroit in the ALCS right now? I don't think so. But point
I think they're
is,
more capable than they were last year.
maybe, but I still, like, if you ask me to pick them against one of those teams, I'm still taking the other teams. Like, to me, the National League is going to win the World Series. Like, I just don't see, unless it's Detroit, and Detroit losing Jackson Jobe, that obviously hurts. And I'm not sure I trust them in a 7-game series against a better, like, I don't know. But
I
point
know
is,
everybody loves
Baltimore,
the
Toronto, and
Tigers, but
Tampa.
they're not that good either.
Yeah, I mean,
Everybody
they've been
loves the
kind of,
Tigers. They're not
yeah,
that good, but they're up and coming and they're hot and they're
yeah,
exciting and they're fun. And that's
yep,
what people buy into. But at the end of the day, yeah, you're right. If they go up against the Dodgers or if the Phillies are clicking,
yep.
the Tigers will have a tough time just like the Yankees would.
I'm not a betting man, but if I had a significant amount of money that I could win a significant amount of money and I had to bet between two teams, right now I'd bet that either the Dodgers or the Phillies are going to be your World Series champs. That's the way I feel. But my point was, these other teams in the AL East need to get their crap together. And I know Tampa's playing really well right now, but there again, do we think Tampa's a World Series contender? I mean, this is a great story. They're fun to watch. They're playing a good brand of baseball. I'm rooting for them. Do we think they're going to win a World Series?
No,
No.
they're
So
going to end
I
up
just want to
just
put it
like
out there.
those other teams that sneak their way in backdoor and then they're barely competitive. That's
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
way the World Series ends up.
I think with the guys, I think with the Yankees is they are just so consistent. They are just so consistent year in and year out. I mean, you look at Cashman, what they did after they lost out on the Soto sweepstakes was fantastic. And they're like you said, Jason, they're in first place. And they're not a perfect team. They have their flaws, but Cashman's gonna make adequate moves in by July 31 to improve that team. So I think the Yankees are in a very unique position because they're a very good team. They're the best team in the East. I think we can all agree with that right now. It's good, as much as Tampa's been very, very impressive. And they're going to make moves and they're going to improve that ball club and they're going to be dangerous and they're going to be right there, in the playoffs, vying
That's not
for a
good
World
enough in New
Series.
York, though, Nico. That's not good
No,
enough.
it's
16 years is a long time for them. It's a long time.
yeah, I agree with
Oh
you.
yeah, if you're a Yankees fan, that's you might as well not even make the playoffs.
Yeah.
If you're not and that's part of the angst in New York right now And that's part of why people yell to fire Aaron Boone and why they yell to fire Brian Cashman, because nobody cares if you win 100 games in the regular season and lose in the ALCS or the ALDS. Nobody cares in New York.
They're the Braves of the '90s, the last 15 years. I mean, they get to the playoffs, and they don't win. And I mean, the Braves still
Well,
take
I think
heat 30
Houston.
years later for not winning more than one World Series, and the Yankees are kind of doing the same thing the last decade and a half.
Yeah.
I think Houston kind of screwed New York in the 2017 World Series with that whole sign stealing scandal. Um, I know that Cashman mentioned
Look,
that
you
last
can
fall,
art. I mean, you
but
can argue that just like you can argue that Judge should have won the MVP that year, but they didn't. At the end of the day, they didn't. And if it was because of sign stealing, then the bottom line is you just weren't good enough anyway.
well, hey, you know what? I expect them to be back this year. And when you look at like I said, we're talking New York versus Boston. I understand the Yankees and their philosophy and their attempt to try to win. I don't understand what Boston's doing.
No, I agree with that. And let me say this:
You
I'm
know,
not saying the Yankees can't win it this year because, like you said, they can tweak the roster. Trade deadline's coming. We'll see what they do. Baseball's crazy, and that's why I try to avoid absolute statements like this team's absolutely not going to do this. We've seen too many
right?
stories where we thought a team wasn't. So I just feel like, as constructed right now, in a 7-game series, I'm taking 3 or 4 teams ahead of the Yankees, but
Yeah.
that can change in July. As Bruce has pointed out, these are different teams after July
Well,
31st, right?
who are the sellers? And I'm not asking us to go through the list, but if Arizona ends up being a seller, that changes the market. If the Braves end up being a seller, that changes the market. If so, these things can change the way the Yankees or the Rays or the Tigers approach this. You mentioned Jackson Joe being out, Jason. So, but what do the Tigers do to replace him? Or do
Yeah.
they do nothing, which is actually what I expect them to do, is nothing and ride it out and see where. No, I'm not saying that to be critical, Jason. What
No,
I'm just
I know.
saying is that as I expect them to take what they have and run with it because they are a good team
Yeah.
and they're not under the pressure that Brian Cashman is. So it's a different dynamic there. So it'll be really interesting to see who is selling, what's available, and how that factors in. Because even like the teams you mentioned, the Phillies really still need a bullpen arm.
Yeah.
And who's going to be available? I don't know the answer to that. And right now, every team I look at that has a good bullpen arm that I think is expendable is a borderline marginal team, and they may not sell.
I think we should do this isn't me being my smart ass self. I think we should do a whole episode as we get close to the trade deadline, just on trade possibilities as we start to see who the seller. Because right now it's still hard to tell. I mean, Arizona is still kind of 500 ish. The Reds are 500 ish. The Braves are still scuffling, although their GM came out last week and emphatically said they will not be selling and emphatically said they will not be trading Chris Sale. So take that for what
Well,
it's worth.
well, we've
Uh,
heard teams say that before, though.
Well, he's still got to sell tickets, right? Like
Yeah.
he's still trying to get people
Right.
to come to the ballpark. So I get it. Um, so yeah, I think we should do a whole episode on that. Just make it a special episode. But let's talk some Cal Raleigh, guys. Big dumper, big dumper. How about that guy? He's setting records. I posted earlier today the same stat that everybody's probably seen by now. But most home runs by a guy that's primarily a catcher. 75 games into the season, so we're almost halfway through. He's got a chance to do some historic stuff. The all-time record for a catcher, quote unquote, is Sal Perez at 48, but he hit 15 of those as a DH. So actually, Javi Lopez with 42 has the most as a catcher. So he's
Mhm.
already closing in on that, and we're not even to the All-Star break. So, yeah, guys, thoughts on Cal Raleigh, and I guess also 2 questions I'll throw out there for you guys to throw around. Does he have any shot at the MVP? And can he by himself carry this Mariners team to a postseason spot?
If Aaron Judge gets back on track, which we all expect him to do, no, he doesn't. And no, he can't carry the Mariners. The Mariners have to pitch in. Julio Rodriguez, Randy Rosarena, these guys got to do their jobs for the Mariners to be successful. We know the pitching is there, but there's no bats to back it up. And Cal Riley, or I'm sorry, not Cal Riley. No one player can do it on their own. And that's the beauty of baseball. No one guy can make that big of a difference to any club. You watch the NBA in basketball, LeBron James moves from one team to another, it would make an enormous difference. It doesn't work that way in baseball, and that's the beauty of it. Even Rafi Devers isn't going to make the Giants a World Series winner.
I think that what Cal's doing is it's absolutely incredible. And like we talked about on the pre-show, just imagine if he wasn't doing what he's doing for that Mariners offense. Let's say he was, batting 235 and he had 11 home runs and 37 RBIs. Where would that team be? As we currently stand, they're in the thick of it, vying for that third wild card. And we can beat a dead horse about the offense in Seattle. We know they need more offense. We know they have the ability to acquire some offense, but they haven't done it yet. We'll see if they do it. They haven't shown us in the last couple of years they'd be willing to part ways with some of those arms. So I'm very skeptical on that. If they think that they can, have guys like Rowdy Tellez and Jorge Polanco and expect fireworks to happen, it's not going to happen. But in regards to Cal Raleigh's season and his opportunity to potentially win a MVP award, I wouldn't rule it out, guys, because, I don't know what the voters are going to be thinking as far as, voting for Cal Raleigh versus Aaron Judge. We know Aaron Judge is going to have a better batting average, a significantly better batting average, right? But are we going to take into account the degree of difficulty of a catcher, putting up these type of stats? It's very, very hard. We don't see this often. This doesn't happen very often. We saw Sal Perez do it a couple of years ago, and I actually forgot about it because I don't know, that was a blunder on my part. But I think if Cal can get to 290 and say he hits, 55 home runs and Judge is batting 330, I think it's going to be a lot closer than we think. And, he may challenge Judge for the MVP, but I wouldn't count on it because Aaron Judge puts up just, these insane, stats. Even if he's on a scale, he's still batting, 376 as of today, something like that. I don't know. I don't know what he did. Yeah. And looking at the box score today, he did go 1 for 3. So,
well, those two questions I asked may actually go together. If he somehow is the main cog in dragging the Mariners to a playoff spot,
that's how he wins.
Does hit 55
that's how he wins.
Yes. Like Nico said, then that's where his best shot is. I still don't think he probably gets it, but he that would be his best shot.
Well, no, I mean, so if you're asking me, who wins in that scenario, if Judge hits 380 and hits 55 home runs, and Raleigh hits 55 home runs and hits what'd you say, Nico? 275, 290,
272.
Whatever. If he improves a little bit on the on base side, and the Mariners make the playoffs, if I'm a voter, I have to ask myself who is the most valuable player in the league to their team, and the answer has to be Cal Raleigh at that point. We all expect the Yankees to make the playoffs whether Judge plays or not. The Mariners offense trickles without Raleigh. Now, I looked a little bit while you guys were talking. They have scored the 4th most amount of runs in the American League, which is actually really impressive, largely because of Raleigh. If you take him out of the equation, it's a much different story, but that's the way he makes progress. But Judge still has to come off of his run. And yes, we're seeing it, but we're seeing the tail end of it. He's starting to hit again a little bit. So we're going to see Judge come back and start to hit more. And then the question is, what can Cal Raleigh do to win the MVP? And it's going to have to be an emotional vote for him to win at that point. He's a catcher. He's doing it in Seattle, and that counts. Don't discount it. It absolutely counts.
I'm not going to be super popular with our New York brethren that we took on in the podcast network if I say this, but I really think Judge. This is not a knock on Judge. I love Aaron Judge. I think he's one of the best players in the game, no question. He's a career 294 hitter. I don't see him staying in this 350, 360, 370 range in the second half of the season. If he comes back to say 310, 315, 320, and Raleigh hits 55
Well,
homers and gets them to the
well, but then
playoffs.
they still have to get to the playoffs, Jason. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Oh yeah. No, I agree. I agree. I think
Even if
that's a
Judge only
requirement.
hits
Yeah,
296 or whatever that
I
number you
agree.
threw out was, he still wins the MVP if the Mariners don't make the
And
playoffs. Because then what did Cal Raleigh really contribute? And yes, if he breaks the catcher's record, that certainly counts for something
and by the way,
as
getting back to
well.
Seattle as a team, we talk about their pitching, but they're actually ranked higher right now in OBP. They're sixth in OBP as a team hitting,
Yeah.
and they're ranked higher in batting average than they are either WHIP or ERA. They're like 18th and 19th. Now I know that takes into account the whole staff. I'm sure their starters, if you just took the starters out, probably better than that.
Yeah, the
But this,
bullpen's been the struggle for Seattle as far as
yeah,
pitching goes, and that's where a lot of those runs have been given up.
yeah.
And they're going to have to address it if they want to
But it's funny because
keep going.
we've sat here on this show and said, man, and we all said it last year, I'm sure, before we even met each other. But like, man, if the Mariners could just hit, if they could just be in the top 15 in offense, well, they are. But now it's a
Yeah.
bullpen issue, and it's also a, like you mentioned earlier, a Julio Rodriguez issue. I think they expected more. All right, what
So
else is on you guys'
before you move
mind?
on really quick,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Jason, I want to put the catcher breaking records into perspective
yeah.
because in 2021, when Salvi hit those 48 home runs, he led the league in home runs. He led the league in RBIs. He put up an 859 OPS with a 273 batting average, and he was seventh in MVP voting.
There you go.
Seventh, not even top five.
Did they make the playoffs
And
that year?
no, well,
Yeah,
did they? No, no. The Royals were terrible,
yeah. So there you go.
but and everybody loves Salvador Perez. Who doesn't like Salvador Perez?
Yeah. No, I agree. Like it's a requirement. If he has any shot at all, they got to get to the postseason for sure. All right, let's talk. Anything else before I think we were going to talk some. Let's talk about the Rays real quick. I mean, I think we have to talk Tampa Rays. I mean, they are 2.5 behind those Yankees that we discussed. They've won. They still won 7 out of 10. Plus 70 run differential. Are we buying the Rays as a threat in the AL East postseason contender? What Nico? What are your thoughts on Tampa?
Yeah, so I think a few weeks ago, I'm not sure if it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, which episode it was, but we were kind of trying to assess the Central as far as those teams under Detroit, and we were trying to kind of forecast what we envisioned for them in the long run, whether it was Minnesota, Cleveland, and Kansas City. Well, those teams have fallen off, and Tampa and Toronto have sort of taken off. And actually, Minnesota actually just got swept by Milwaukee, and they actually fall 3 or 4 games under 500. So Minnesota seems to be
They lost
trending the
9
wrong trending the wrong direction pretty quickly. They're just a very strange team. They're just so up and down. But in regards to Tampa, I am buying it, man. I like what they're doing, and as more time goes by, I really like that offense. And the one guy that sort of doesn't get the appreciation year in and year out uh, in baseball is Yandy Diaz. I mean, he has been just a model of consistency for that Rays lineup, um, along with Brendan Lowe, Junior Caminero, and then another guy he might be an all-star is Jonathan Aranda. So they're quietly building a really nice, not building, they're showing us that they have a really nice offense. And the pitching's been pretty good too. Shane Bass has been stepping up for them. And you have to like the manager too. I mean, Kevin Cash, we talk about him a lot. He doesn't get the love that he deserves across the landscape of baseball. Um, so yeah, I'm buying into Tampa, and I like him to get to the playoffs. I don't know if I don't expect them to chase the Yankees down. If they did, I wouldn't complain. But uh, I like what I've seen from Tampa, and it's a great story. I mean, and then Toronto too as well. I mean, they're right there, and so love what I'm seeing from Tampa. It's so strange to watch them play in a AAA ballpark, but I'm getting used to it at this point. And hey, go Tampa, go!
I'm not jumping off the Canadian bandwagon yet, mostly just to get on Bruce's nerves. But the Jays are still a -10 run differential. They just lost. I think they just lost a series to the White Sox. I think we were actually debating a few weeks ago, Nico. Like, I think we threw it out there. Who do we believe in more, Tampa or Toronto? I think me and you said Toronto. Um, I'm starting to see what Bruce is talking about. I believe a lot more in Tampa right now. I do think Tampa will hang around. I do think they are a postseason team right now. I would be shocked if the Red Sox don't come back and pass the Blue Jays at least for third. I would love to see a story like Tampa. We've talked about it just to see that, just to see that ALCS in the Tampa and George Steinbrenner Field. And you know what? Look, it could I mean, they could get to the ALCS. Like I wouldn't say that's impossible in the American League, but yeah, it's a good story. Bruce, your thoughts on the Rays? And you can do what I
So,
told you so in Toronto if you like. I'll allow it.
we're not there yet. We'll get there. Don't worry.
Okay. All right.
There's a team that went on a 19-9 run to get not, but that just didn't bring them relevance. That put them right in the thick of everything in the American League. They are 2.5 games behind the Yankees right now. They've won 7 out of their last 10. Even if we just cut it down to that, they're going to go play Kansas City, but which should help them. But they have a plus 70 run differential right now, and they just after I think after today's game they went over giving up 300 runs this season, and we know that Steinbrenner Field plays a little bit offensive as far as runs scored goes. So what we're seeing, unlike with the Athletics, is the Rays are countering in that those bandbox ballparks by actually putting up some offense.
Yep.
And they've become over the past say 4 or 5 weeks consistent about it. It doesn't matter if they're home or away. And now they're going to start playing more of those away games. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond to that change. But away they're 16-12 so far this season. So I don't see that being a huge impact on their bottom line. The pitching has become consistent, the offense has become consistent, and the one thing that they have over, I would say the majority, not everyone, but the majority of the league is what Nico said, is Kevin Cash at the helm, who is an excellent manager. And when he's got some tools to work with, he wins. He always wins when he has tools to work with. And Tampa Bay is just going to stay around. And whether they pass the Yankees is purely in the Yankees' hands.
Yeah.
The Yankees hold the keys to their own destiny. They're scuffling, but they only have 8 days left of June, and they play better in July every year under Boone, so that might work out for them. I'm still in favor of firing Boone. I still think the Yankees don't win a World Series with Boone as the manager. So I am absolutely buying into Tampa Bay, and if they won the American League East, I wouldn't be shocked. I would be disappointed, but I wouldn't be shocked.
Their expected win loss is actually 3 games better than what they
It
are. So
is, yeah.
difficult. So
It's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, well, when you score 70 runs more than you give up, you expect to win a lot of ball games.
Well, let's talk some National League, guys. As we record this, the Mets and Phillies are playing the rubber game of their 3-game set. And I haven't checked the score, but 0-0. You guys' thoughts? I mean, it's only been 2 games. They're both tied for first. So whoever wins tonight will take a 1-game lead. The Phillies won 8 of 10. The Mets have still lost 7 of 10. They seem to be heading in different directions. The Mets got swept by the Braves, and that's right. Typically, you wouldn't be eyebrow raising at that, but the way the Braves are playing overall, that is an eyebrow raiser. So, you guys' thoughts on the Mets, who are still 27-10 at home, by the way, which I said earlier, I thought that would start to come back, like even out a little bit. That's a really good home record. But you guys' thoughts on the Mets and Phillies and where the NL East might be headed?
Well, I do think that away record for the Mets is going to hurt them. The 19-21 away from Citi Field, and you can absolutely win a division and run into the playoffs by dominating at home. They can absolutely do that. I'm not sure they're going to. I still see the Phillies overtaking them. I don't know if today's the day that they actually overtake them and start to walk away from them or not. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was. The Mets sent Alvarez down to AAA today. Hopefully he can get it cleaned up and figure out what's wrong with his swing and why he can't seem to hit all of a sudden again and come back up for the Mets. But if not, that catching position is going to be an issue for them coming up into the late season run. And they might have to do something in order to augment that position, which I know sounds funny, but that might be their reality. Their pitching has remained reasonably stable, and hopefully for them it stays that way. But at the end of the day, Bryce Harper's coming back in the next couple of weeks. The Phillies offense is just going to get more solid, and they're going to have a problem as to where to play everybody if Otto Kemp continues to actually be a decent player in the lineup. He's proven that he can hit major league pitching. I mean, he's not lighting up the world, but he's been good. And then the question starts to become, where does everybody play? And do we see Justin Crawford, who is really just sitting and languishing in Lehigh Valley right now for the Phillies? It'll be really interesting to see how the Phillies handle this. We know we're going to see Painter come up. Abel stumbling a little bit, but he's not terrible either. So are the Phillies going to move Abel? I keep hearing that they're going to move Abel. We'll just have to wait and see, but I still see the Phillies taking this division. But the way the Mets are showing, maybe it's a dogfight the whole way. I know they're cold now. Those things even out. Everyone plays to the back of the baseball card eventually.
Yeah, the Mets are supposed to get Montas back possibly Tuesday, I believe. Now, if I'm not mistaken, he has not looked very good in his minor league starts.
No.
Me and Mark Collier of the Almost Cooperstown broadcast, he's a big Mets guy. We discussed this on that episode, but it's pitching depth. I mean, and surely he can't come back and be just awful. So that might help the Mets a little bit. He was mentioning that it does look like the pitching is starting to show some chinks in the armor, and he thought like we did. They needed the offense.
It is.
So it may
Well,
be
they need
happening a little
Montas
sooner
to
than you
come
thought.
back and take some of the load off of the guys
Yes,
who've been carrying the load. And
absolutely.
as much as I'd love to say that that's a no-brainer, like bringing Shohei back, you were pretty sure he was going to be okay. Montas has had his struggles over the years, and so what Frankie are you going to get? And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I know he's struggling, but maybe it's just while he's getting back into the groove. I
Yeah.
don't know. It may be one of those cornerstone moments for the Mets season if he comes back, goes 3 innings and gives up 12 hits and 6 runs and walks 5 guys.
Yeah. Nico, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm gonna again. I don't want the Phillies fans to jump at me. I've been kind of, I'm not really. I haven't hopped onto the Phillies bandwagon this year. I think Jason remembers. I've been very glum on the Phillies since the preseason. I look at the Phillies, and like I've said before many times, this is an older baseball team. Okay, this team is in. This is the last rodeo with this cast of crew. This group of guys.
I agree with that.
I understand Zach Wheeler's great. I understand Aaron Nola can be great. I understand Ranger Suarez is a quality pitcher. Nick Castellanos has great moments for the Phillies. I just don't trust them to put it all together consistently. And I think they've shown that this season. They've just been kind of, the highest of highs and then the lows of lows. Just very inconsistent. Now, I understand they're sitting here tied for first place with the Mets, but I just can't trust this team to sort of keep it together for the long haul. Do I expect them to make the playoffs? I do. I just don't know if they can stay healthy and consistent throughout the course of the season. I like the Mets more. I think the Soto factor for the Mets is going to play dividend most in the playoffs. He's a big-time playoff performer for the Mets. Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso has obviously been playing out of his mind. Sean Manaea is coming back for the Mets. Hopefully he can return to that form that he had last season. It remains to be seen. Mark Vientos is coming back. So you're going to see this Mets team get better, and you're going to see, more of these guys, hopefully help the ball club, win consistently, play winning baseball going, in weeks and months ahead. I just can't trust the Phillies, it's weird because I'm very, very nervous for the Phillies, but I say that at the same time, I feel like they match up the best with the Dodgers. I can't explain that analogy. I just can't. You know what I mean? I feel like I couldn't trust them in a short series against San Diego or, Chicago, many of these NL teams. But if they play the Dodgers in the NLCS, I'll tell you, they have the best shot at beating the Dodgers. And I can't explain it. It's just the star power of Schwarber and Harper and those guys, Trey Turner. There's just so much star power, but these guys are getting older, and I just don't know if they can keep it together long enough.
I think so. I'm going to translate a little bit, Nico, because I agree with what you said. The problem with the Phillies is that they run out the same guys and expect something different to happen when the chips are not when the chips are down, but in a high leverage situation, they're running out guys who go hot and cold, and they go through these cold streaks that are just crippling for the team. And how can you expect the NLCS to go any different with the same star power that you run out there every year in and out? And that's why I really think it's going to be so key how they handle the next month with their transactions. And is Dave Dombrowski going to realize that he actually needs to change something for this team to perform differently in the playoffs? We're all pretty sure they're going to get there. The question is, who are they going to be when they get there? Are we going to see the same pitching performances out of Suarez and Wheeler and Luzardo that we've been seeing? Are we going to see Harper be the guy he was in 2022 in the playoffs, and Castellanos be the guy who hit like home runs in 4 or 5 games in a row, in that playoff run? And then are they all going to stop hitting again like they did in both years? That's what the Phillies do. They go hot, they go cold, and when they go cold, everything stops. Everything. And who's the catalyst in that lineup who makes it change? There isn't one. Nobody.
It needs to be
Because
Harper. It needs to be Bryce.
oh
He's the
no,
leader.
well, it doesn't need to be Bryce. It could literally be anybody. But even
Yeah.
when they go cold, Bryce goes cold too. And Bryce goes through these periods where he hits 300, but they're all singles and doubles, and then he adjusts his swing and he gets better again. But the Phillies need consistency, and I could actually insert probably 4 or 5 teams in that same sentence and have the same outcome in the end. Nico, you mentioned Chicago. Chicago is a much more consistent lineup than the Phillies are. I don't think they're better than the Phillies, but at the end of the day, if Chicago is doing what Chicago does, and the Phillies meet them in the playoffs, and the Phillies decide they're not going to hit this week, then they're out, and it's going to be that fast and easy for the Cubs.
If the Phillies don't get it
Yeah,
done in the next couple years with Bryce Harper and that
Well, no,
group,
this is it. No, Nico's right.
well,
This is
yeah,
the year
I agree.
because
I
they
just,
lose
we don't know
they
what
lose
kind of moves they make,
Castellanos.
right? They can
They're
extend the
talking
life
about
of it
not
with the
re-signing
right numbers.
Schwarber.
Yeah.
I mean, and Real Muto's not going to be catching in 2 years anymore. So what are they going to do with him? They don't have a catcher because they don't have anybody who can catch and hit in the system.
How big?
This team is right there.
What I was going to say too is like, regardless of the window, if it closes this year, the loss to Arizona in 2023 will haunt that group
Yeah,
forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
but this is
That was it.
that's
That was
exactly it right there. That was a series they could have won if the bats didn't turn off.
Absolutely. Nico, you had some thoughts there? Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, I look back, and again, I don't like to look back and judge teams based off of last playoff, last fall, last October. But the way the Phillies faltered against the Mets in the NLDS of last season, it just left a bad taste in my mouth. I can't explain it. I just don't trust them in a short series. But I can tell you, I have a great deal of confidence that they can match up the best with the Dodgers. So it's feast or famine for Philly, and I don't know if they can put it together and go on a run that we know they can do, but will they do? Because they have been on a backwards trajectory now for a couple seasons, and it's very concerning. Like Bruce said, it's the same team they're trotting out there, every year. Alec, even the younger guys, Alec Baum, I forgot the Bryson Stott, some really good players, but it's just kind of that same formula for the Phillies day in and day out. And I understand that Zach Wheeler is a model of consistency, and they have an ability to play some of the, they have the ability to win the whole tournament. They can win the World Series. There's no doubt about it. I don't think you can argue that. But they can also just completely fall apart against, like Bruce mentioned, Chicago, for an example. San Diego, if San Diego's there. I mean, I'm just saying they've shown you they've done that in recent years, and I kind of feel the same way about them. And I like the Mets a bit more because the Mets have been a really good baseball team since, about a year ago till now. They've just been showing you that they are the real deal. They were 2 games away from the World Series last year. They acquired Juan Soto. I have concerns about the pitching staff, but, it's okay for now. They're going to get Manaea back. And I just love those guys in a postseason series. Lindor, Alonso, Soto, Nimmo. I don't know what it is. And you know what? I even like the manager more. I really do. I like Mendoza. He's got a really strong fingerprint on that team right now. And I know Steve Cohen's he's gonna improve that ball club. They're gonna make moves. Does a Luis Robert become available? Does some of those guys in Arizona become available? I think the Mets have an opportunity to become a very dangerous team.
I don't disagree. I'm still sticking with the Phillies to win that division, but that doesn't mean anything once you get to the playoffs. We've seen that, right?
For the record, I liked Atlanta coming into the season. I really did. And
we're gonna have to let you go, Nico. We're gonna have to let you go for saying that.
I think they're only 6.5 games back in the wild card, so they're not dead yet. They're not dead yet, Jason.
I wish they'd just die. Honestly, why don't you just go ahead and die? It'd make it easier on Braves fans. Just hope is a terrible thing. No, I hear you. I don't even want to. I'll address that on the other podcast. We'll keep away from the Braves. I do want to point out a couple of just statistical. I won't call them anomalies, but I think it's a great example of just baseball because we have talked about these guys in opposite ways. So let's start with Freddie Freeman. So we haven't talked about the NL West yet. Freddie Freeman in the last 22 days, so really since the 1st of June, not counting whatever he did today. I haven't looked at the box score. Freddie Freeman is batting .216, 18 strikeouts and no homers and 4 RBI. That's Freddie Freeman, the guy that we have talked about being the mud. I'm just pointing that out. I love Freddie. I'm just pointing that out. Like, this can happen to anybody. It's happening to Aaron Judge a little bit. On the opposite side of that, including us, people buried this guy, and I love him. He's one of my favorite players. He played for the Braves. Charlie Morton. You want to talk about trade bait? Since late April, early May, Charlie Morton is 4-1 with a 2.95 ERA. He has struck out 50 and walked 12. You remember how bad Charlie Morton was the first few weeks of the season and how much crap people were giving him? And deservedly so. He was awful.
I want to remind everybody that we all buried him. All 3 of us buried Charlie Morton.
I'm raising my hand. Raising my hand. And at the time, he kind of deserved it. But, I mean, it shows you the ever-changing nature of this game. And one of the reasons we love it, right? Because things that happen in April, you're going to forget about by September, right? And even things happening right now, the swoon maybe that the Mets are going through and the Yankees went through, it may not matter come that time. But when we get to our trade bait episode, if he's still pitching like that, it would not shock me if Charlie Morton's an Atlanta Brave again, by the way, by the trade deadline. That just smacks of Alex Anthopoulos, bringing him and Jason Hayward back, who was DFA'd by the Padres. Yeah. So, yeah. But, yeah, thoughts in general, guys, on the NL West and Central really quick. We're kind of going over here, but just really quick, NL Central and West are really the only 2 we haven't covered tonight. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so in the NL West, I think, and again, a general assessment of Major League Baseball to this point, the more time that goes by, the more I feel like we're just living in the Dodger time. You know what I mean? I really feel like this team is just so deep. They're going to be very difficult to deal with in October. And in retrospect with the West, San Diego's sort of fallen apart. I don't know if I know they played Kansas City. I'm not sure if they won today. They've taken a huge step back. I don't even think they're in current wild card place right now. I don't think they're in a wild card situation. So San Diego, as hot as they were, they've come down to earth in a big way. They kind of remind me of a hot poker hand, the Padres. You know what I mean? They really are, because when they're on, and when they're off, they're off. But the Giants, Jason, that's the team that I really like after this Devers trade. I really feel like the Giants are going to be a very dangerous team in October, assuming they get there. I expect them to get there. I think you guys expect them to get there. So I really like what I'm seeing from the Giants. I'm paying a really close attention with Arizona because, again, they're okay for now. They still have a couple games over 500. but they have so many valuable assets to trade off to other teams if they decide to. So we're going to have to pay very close attention to Arizona and some of those guys, and specifically Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly. I've even heard some rumblings that they would possibly enter. They're shopping or would shop Naylor, the first baseman they just acquired. Lourdes Gurriel is another guy that I'm hearing some rumors on. So Arizona is a very interesting team to watch as we, finish off June and go into July. But yeah, I think we're living in a Dodgers time. I really do. They're just showing you their class.
Yeah, the NL wild card could be super entertaining down the stretch if all these teams can play decent ball. I mean, they're not all going to stay hot, but the Padres are currently the third wild card by half game, half game out of the third wild card behind Milwaukee, who we haven't really talked about. They've gotten hot. Then you got the Cardinals, the Reds, the D-backs, and then a little bit further back the Braves. So if they jump into it, but that could be a dogfight for that third spot in the NL wild card. What about the Brewers, guys? Are we
Yeah,
buying
I'm
back
gonna
into the
I'm gonna
Brewers?
jump in and say I was wrong about the Brewers. They're a better team than I thought they were.
Yeah, I
I,
mean, I was about to ask, are we buying
I
them being
like them
back
better
in
than the
stick?
Padres for sure right now. Right now, anyway.
Yeah, yeah, they're very even right now. I just don't know about the Brewers, man. I don't. I'm still on the fence. I don't know. Nico, your thoughts on Milwaukee?
Yeah, I said a few weeks ago that I really like what I'm seeing from Milwaukee. I think they've sort of mirrored Tampa Bay a bit as far as they just kind of were hanging around that 500 mark, and they just kind of hit the gas now in their winning series. They just swept Minnesota, so shout out to Trevor Plouffe. His Twins are 3 games under 500. Um, but if you look at this Milwaukee lineup, it's a very good lineup, and they just find a way. They just find a way, and we get so frustrated as baseball fans when they let so many of these players walk. Willie Adames, Corbin Burns, and they just find replacements, and they continue to, they traded Devin Williams to the Yankees. And we're all screaming, why give the Yankees Devin Williams? but But no, I'm buying Milwaukee. I said a few weeks ago, I think they're going to challenge Chicago for the Central title. I think it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very fun to watch. Craig Council, Milwaukee, Chicago, that fun team in Chicago, and all that they got going on right now. But I'm buying Milwaukee, and I really like them, and they keep winning like Tampa.
They've scored more runs. They've scored the same amount of runs as the Phillies. They've outscored the Mets, the Giants, Padres, the Reds. So I mean, they can score, and I just don't know where it's coming from. Like they just, like you said, they just find a way every season to keep being a pretty good team. So, all right, guys, what else you guys want to wrap up with? We've covered both leagues pretty well here. Anything else on your mind before we call it a week?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think it's very interesting, the third wild card scenario. You can make an argument that there's only a handful of teams that are really truly buried. When you look at the AL and you look at Baltimore and how horrible of the season they've had, they're not necessarily buried. I mean, they're close, but they're not necessarily buried completely. I don't expect them to come back. Adley Rushman just hit the injured list for the first time in his career. And then in the NL, I don't want to bring it up again, but the Braves too, I believe they're 6 or 7 games back. They're not out of it. I mean, they just have to get hot. They just have to go on a run. They need to string 4, 5, 6 games in a row. They need to continue to win series and get hot, and anything's possible.
The Braves are in the same category that Bruce put the Phillies in. They keep rolling out the same lineup day after day, expecting something different. And these guys have proven, or they are proving, that they cannot adjust. I'm watching Michael Harris, who was supposed to be the next big thing, and the guy's got a glove, man. I mean, he's Andrew Jones out there in center field, but he swings at pitches that fall 4 feet in front of the plate. So I'll go off on that on the Braves podcast, but I'm not buying the Braves anymore, and I'm not trying to be negative Brave guy. I think they're done. I think they're done, and I don't think there's anything they can do to fix all of the problems they have at the trade deadline. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm dead wrong, and somebody throws this in my face in a few weeks, obviously. But I've been watching this team all year. I've watched every game almost, and it's just the same. Yeah, they swept the Mets. Well, the Mets were struggling. Mets were struggling. And then they also lost a game to the Rockies, and they lost 2 games to the Marlins. So the sweep of the Mets seems kind of like, oh well now. So anyway, all right. Guys, it's been another great episode. Bruce, did you have anything? I don't want to leave you out if you had one more. All right. Bruce is shaking his head no. So, all right, cool. Guys, another great episode in the books. We've got all kind of podcasts for you folks now. If you're listening to this one, we appreciate it. But also, Bruce has a great one, the Ring the Bell podcast, Philadelphia baseball history. Is that an appropriate way to describe it? I have the 9521 Atlanta Braves podcast. We just took on a New York podcast that covers both the Met and the Yankees, New York MLB Talk. So check that out. And we're working on more. So stay tuned for that. And we appreciate you, and we will see you at the ballpark.